Hey, welcome to Note Investor Podcast. I'm Dan Deppin, and today I'm joined by Ben Fredericks of Noteworthy USA. Ben, how's it going?
Hey Dan, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Doing well.
anytime. Yeah, glad you could join. So, one of the things I get asked about a lot. In fact, I had a guy like 2 days ago asking me, they're like, what kind of note events should I go to or can I go to? And that's part of the business you're in. So I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah. That's how I got into the space in general was just going to events and learning as much as I could. So they're super valuable. There's a bunch to go to. I mean, really, um, I don't belittle anybody's event. I think they're all fantastic. Node Expo and there's one that gets done in down Distress Mortgage Expo, DME,
Hmm.
and so I know all those guys and they all put on great events. So I think there's something to be learned at any one of them.
Yeah. So how did you get involved in the note space originally?
Yeah, it was kind of strange. A gentleman that I knew had you know uh, approached me about getting involved in some investing in some real estate, and he started talking to me about seller financing. And I never really considered that that was a thing that one could do. And so he was telling me about it, and I was like, wow, people can actually do this. So,
Hmm.
and he knew my background was actually in mortgage. So I was, during the boom, I was working for Lehman Brothers and, had done that and the mortgage broker thing as well. And so he told me, he encouraged me to go back and maybe get my license, and then I could help people underwrite their loans, for the SAFE Act and, all of that. So a big part of
Hmm.
what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So it grew to a point where I was doing a lot of that. And then by association, I was introduced to Noteworthy and my partner over there, Aaron. And, I started going to the events and, I was a vendor, so I was there
Hmm.
holding a booth and, just meeting investors and not really knowing much about the space other than, hey, I do know how to underwrite a loan. I know how to, look at the deal and make sure it fits and debt ratio is good and all that. But what I did was I would sort of, quasi sneak into the event and I would just be in the back taking notes while everybody was in there in session, and then I would study that feverishly. And then I was learning a lot by association, just underwriting the notes. And so it became such an idea. I said, geez, I'm doing this for others. I should be doing this for myself. And so that was kind of how it kicked off. And I raised a little bit of private money and bought my first couple of deals, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit similar to Fred and Tracy Rui that I talked to
Yeah,
recently, where they kind of worked in the business and then, now for a long time they've been doing it on their own.
yeah,
So how long has Noteworthy been around? That's one of the older ones, isn't it?
yeah. Noteworthy's been around since like the mid '80s.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it's been a real kind of staple in the industry, which was interesting to me. I mean, I didn't really come into this with the expectation of like, oh, you're gonna, be running events. But it was, I thought, an interesting way to give back to an industry that I've learned so much from over the years. And and I also thought like too, you know, in the beginning, I kind of looked at it from a 10,000-foot view of like, all right, notes seems like the elder statesman of investing, like a lot of the
Mhm.
people were, they're deep into the game of life, so to speak, and investing. And, they're a little bit more sophisticated in that they know how all this stuff works. But I thought the real opportunity is like, okay, how can we bring this to potentially a new generation of people that don't know that it exists, don't understand how it works, but they could be making the play for cash flow in a more creative way. And that's really the biggest reason that I got involved. I was like, all right, I think I see an opportunity here to bring this to, a younger generation of note investors.
Yeah, and there's certain aspects of note investing, like especially like wraps and subject to that seem to be increasingly popular. Like there's aspects that are really sexy, but
Yeah.
in reality, there, that concept is like 45, 50 years old at least. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not
Yeah.
actually new. It's just some people kind of
Yeah, they
kind of
just put
caught
new
on to
wrapping
it.
paper on it, right? So it's just trying to make it interesting and new creative ways to do the deals in the space.
But yeah, it's funny too how like a lot of people are surprised how as an individual you can basically function as a bank in a lot of
Yeah.
respects, not just buying stuff and holding it and collecting payments, but yeah, you're right, like doing originations and creating seller finance notes. Yeah, some people are kind of blown away when they learn that that's even an
Yeah.
option.
Yeah, it's cool too because I think it just opens up a an additional exit strategy into a deal, you know. So now whenever I buy a deal, I'm looking to sell it in a multitude of ways. You know, it could be I sell it for cash, I sell it as a rental, or I sell it on seller financing. I'm happy to do either one of those three. But if I'm, just a wholesaler per se, and I'm like, well, I got to flip this contract, I really only have one exit strategy there. So, I love the idea of having different ways that I can structure the deal and get creative with it. So I think it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's nice because if you're wholesaling or, like some people still try to broker notes, but I don't know how successful they are at that. They're doing all this
Yeah.
running around. And even if you're successful, you're kind of generating one-time fee income. Whereas if you like do an
Yeah.
owner finance exit, you could wheel around and sell the note. Like you could just exit right there, but then you have options to hold things for cash flow and
Yeah.
other kinds
Yeah.
of
I think
stuff.
I think a lot of people, this is where I was, kind of making the point of like the newer generation. A lot of people get their start in the wholesaling or maybe brokering notes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of times they necessarily know how to pivot out of that. You don't, that's not necessarily something that you want to be doing forever. Like along the way, you can keep doing it, but I think it's wise if you can figure out, all right, how do I do this on my own? And then maybe every third or fourth deal, I keep it, and I find a
Mm-hmm.
way to do that deal as a seller finance deal or a wrap or sub two or whatever. So I think there's, that's kind of the interesting piece that I wanted to bring to people is like, hey, you're not just pigeonholed in doing fix and flips or wholesaling deals. Like there's more to this and there's more opportunity there, especially once you create a note. I mean, the beauty of it is it really doesn't take much additional effort, So the idea of passive income for landlords is laughable. If you've ever actually been a landlord, it's not passive at all. It's work. So, and even notes, there's still work to be done, but not quite as much.
Yeah. I've never really been a landlord myself, but I hang out with enough of them and I hear a lot of the complaints. So yeah, if you create a note, if you do it right, like if you create a solid one,
Yeah.
it can be extremely passive. Although I've done a lot of non-performers or, there's other ways to do notes that can be worse than being a landlord. If you get a bad
Yeah.
non-performer. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always work to be done for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So then how did you like go from that to coming into, taking over being a partner in Noteworthy?
Yeah, so I became good friends with Aaron Holderman, who's the owner, and now he is partner over in Directed IRA. But we just kind of hit it off, and he had approached me and said, "Hey, I'd like some help doing this. The events are a lot of work, and I didn't necessarily know the scope of that. I think entering
Mm-hmm.
in." But I thought it would be good, just from the aspect of networking, and it has. It's been fantastic. Like I've met some amazing people, people that'll be lifelong friends in this space, and for that, it's just been worth its weight in gold. But yeah, so Aaron asked me if I had an interest in joining, and like we were talking before we hopped on here, it was like at the almost one of the worst opportune times. It was like right before COVID happened. So you imagine
Mm-hmm.
you get involved in an event company where you're supposed to be getting lots of people together, and then all of a sudden you can't get people together. So the first 2 years were very challenging. But we made it work with virtual stuff, and I I only got involved under the aspect of saying, hey, listen, I don't want this to be a pitchathon. when people come to our events. Like, I don't want every person trying to sell them a course and,
Hmm.
$50,000 coaching and, all this kind of stuff. I really wanted it to be people that brought value. And I think we've done that the years that I've been involved. And there's still opportunity for people to get coaching and mentoring, but I like it to happen more from an organic standpoint. Like, if they connect with somebody there, like, get to know them well, before you just like, oh, I really enjoyed that PowerPoint. Let me go drop 10 grand on your course. I just don't,
Hmm.
having invested, you know, well over six figures myself into courses and things in this business, you know, you got to kind of take a lot of that stuff with a grain of salt and pick your mentors carefully.
Yeah, that's true. Because I've seen so I've done a fair number of courses and things myself, not anywhere close to six figures, but yeah, there's a wide range of quality out there. And live events are a
Yeah.
great way to get to actually know people. Because when I started in notes, like, I spent like 6 months going down the rabbit hole and watching what YouTubes and other things. This is like 2016, 17, what existed at the time. There was a lot less then, but before I actually bought anything, I went to Note Expo because I was like, well, I want to meet
Yeah.
some of these characters face to face before I get involved
Yeah.
in the industry. And live events are just really nice for doing that.
Yeah, I think you get a really good grasp of who that person is, So, and especially if you get to break bread with them at the event or, hang out a little bit afterwards, it's, that's where the magic is, in developing relationships. So that's why I think, we don't charge much for our events. I mean, a couple $100 to come out for 2 days and learn from some of the greatest people in the space that are writing tons of notes and doing big business.
Hmm.
And even if those people weren't there, even if it was just a group of people in a room that were all note investors, it's worth it because you don't know what deals are going to be made while you're there. So, and what relationships will come of it. So I know it's a challenge a lot of times for people to travel and, get away from their families and stuff. I don't personally like doing it. Like, I've had a couple of note events that we've done where I've had to be away where it was like the daddy daughter dance and I had to
Hmm.
miss that. So, but it is what it is, right? Like, we have to have a growth mindset and make those things up maybe later to our family, which I of course did. But I think making the time to do those things is extremely important, especially if you have big goals and you want to take it to the next level.
Yeah. And what's fun too, when you can kind of talk to people live, like off to the side, just you learn a lot more about the good, the bad, and the ugly too, right? Like,
Mm,
for me, a lot of times you get an idea like what's really going on, because sometimes people will have, failures or problems or big successes that they don't necessarily talk about publicly. So you get
yeah,
a real good read on like what's happening.
yeah. Yeah, and that's always been a big thing for me too, is like the people that we have to come out and speak. Like, I tell them, I want you to be real. Like, tell us the stuff that you've screwed up. Like, tell us the places where it's gone horribly wrong, because that's where, you learn the most. And I think people can, yeah, it's great. Oh, I did this many notes. Okay, well, how many times did you screw up before you got to the point where you were doing it consistently? What were you screwing up on? What were you doing wrong? I analyzed this deal wrong. Oh, I didn't. It was a quick claim deed. I didn't check the chain of title. I didn't do this.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of different things that you can learn from people's mistakes rather than just their successes too. So that's a big thing. I always encourage. Right before we have do our event, I always tell our people, listen, you're not doing anybody favors by just telling them the good. Like, peel back the layers a little bit. Tell us the ugly stuff too. I think it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, when I started in notes, I bumped into a couple different people that had been doing it for a while who told me, oh, I've done, whatever it is, X number of notes. I've never lost money on a note. If you do it right, you should never lose money. And having done it for a bit, like, that's BS. Like, stuff happens, especially if you do a non-performing. Like, these days, if somebody tells me they've never lost money on a note, they've either not done any, or they haven't done much, or they're just lying about
Right.
it. Because I remember a couple of years ago when I went to the IMM conference in Fort Lauderdale, and that one, it wasn't as suitable for individuals. It's a lot more like hedge
Yeah.
fund people. It's kind of like a higher level of the industry, but it was really fascinating talking to some of those guys. And, they were pretty candid about some of the stuff that they had screwed up and, different
Yeah.
problems. So, even these people who have boatloads of experience will occasionally run into something that they hadn't seen before. So it
Yeah.
definitely happens.
Yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah. I had just a weird one that I was looking at the other day where it was like 5 buildings on a single APN, like a parcel, and it was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
geez, how am I supposed to comp this? Like, what if this goes sideways, and it doesn't work out? So that to me is like actually one of my favorite things about this business is that not there's not a day that's a cookie cutter day. Like almost every
Yeah.
day is I'm looking at something different, which is great for my ADD because it keeps me engaged. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like something interesting is happening here. So, um, yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts about this business.
Oh, cool. So what's one of the most like unusual deals you've bumped into?
Most of my deals have been on the seller finance side. So, sometimes I'm trying to think we probably had some unique properties along the way. Properties I would buy properties in bulk from banks and auction, and then
Mm-hmm.
we would seller finance those deals. So I don't know that there's one that's basically the most unique, but I do know like the the mistakes that I made up front, like in the beginning, where it was like if I would go to resell a note and I didn't have something, so I was like, okay, now
Mm-hmm.
I gotta like chalk this down for next time. Or a good friend of mine in the space, Kevin Shortell, he would like look at some of our files and be like, hey, you're not getting this and this and this. So I was like, all right, taking notes, like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
I gotta check that off next time, make sure. And then, so a lot of it was in the beginning was just revamping our processes and systems to try and get everything in tune. So yeah, I wish I could pinpoint one where I think, oh gee, that was like super unique, but a lot of them were just unique mistakes that I made along the
Yeah.
way, and trying to not make them twice.
Yeah. Mine have been deals where I didn't necessarily make a big mistake or make a mistake at all, but it seems like in the non-performing world, I've had a couple where when things get crazy, like everything gets crazy. I've got one I did a case study on last year. I did a two-parter and I thought I was almost done. I was going to release the third part. And then it got a lot weirder. And I finally exited it. So I don't want to spoil it. So at some point before too long here, I need to come back to that and wrap it
Yeah.
up. But it was like, non-performer, worked out a deal with the borrower, kind of started performing again, stopped, had to file foreclosure, borrower files bankruptcy, borrower, you get through that, back to foreclosure, borrower fights it. It was the only time I actually had to show up physically in court
Mm.
because, and got through that. He had a kitchen fire at one point, and then, yeah, and then a bunch of other stuff after that. It worked out in the end, but holy cow, like I don't know if I can even remember it. Like, you can make a 2-hour movie out of the thing, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy some of the things that can happen in the space. I mean, real estate is like that on all fronts, I suppose. Whether you're flipping a deal or fix and flipping a deal, somehow, some way, there's always something that could possibly go sideways. So,
Yeah, the best was at the
like,
end, basically when I was already done and the neighbor called and said that some trees fell from that property onto 3 cars on her
oh,
property, which was
oh no,
really, yeah,
that's the worst.
it worked out okay. And then, of course, I asked her to send photos, and I even told her, send me some photos from a distance and send it with the house in the back so I can like get the lay of the land. And of
You're
course,
right.
she sent me close-ups, and so you can't tell. I'm
You're
like
right.
the close-ups.
It's in front of her own house.
Yeah, I knew she was going to do that. She'd do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. But now maybe now's a good time to tell us about the next event that's coming up here over the winter.
Yeah, so February 28th to March 1st, we will be in Scottsdale at the Orange Tree Golf Club.
Mm,
So very excited about that. If you're somewhere cold, it's a great opportunity to get out to the desert. It's a great time of year to be in Scottsdale. I refuse to go out in the summertime, so uh, hot enough here in Florida. So, but in February and March, it's absolutely beautiful. And we've got some great people coming out. One of my favorites, who's actually retiring, and I practically begged him to come out and do just one more because I love him so much, is Bob Zachmeyer. So he's going to come out and do a great presentation for us. But I've got some people that have never presented in the no space. I've got a private money guy who created his own private money lending fund, and he's bringing like $20 million worth of notes that he's interested in
mm.
potentially selling. So, he doesn't leave his his home base unless he's traveling for personal pleasure. So to get him to come was like I had to like really pull some strings. But this goes back to the network, right? So I met him at another event, at my buddy Dan's event, and so it's going to be really great. I'm super excited about it. Like I said, I was telling you, I took a year off last year just to not do events because they are a lot of work. They take a lot of effort to put on, and I didn't want to ever have something like Node Expo. I love Eddie's event. I've been to it multiple times, but it's so big. Like I can't imagine taking that on. So we keep ours a little bit more intimate. It'll be 100 people, and I like it that way because it gives everybody an opportunity to really kind of meet and mingle and get together, and we get to know people a little bit better. So as opposed to this big convention. So I think there's value in both of those, but we wanted to have ours be a little bit more intimate and uh, in that capacity. So, but if you're interested in coming, I'm going to do a special promo code for your audience. You'll put it down in the links. I'll send that to
Yep.
you. But it's just go to noteworthyusa.com/events, and you'll find the ticket options there as well. So we're already about half sold out. So if you're interested in coming, I'd encourage you to get your ticket ASAP.
Yeah, and I know I'll be there. But yeah, I can't imagine what goes into doing an event. I know I've talked to Nathan Turner about when, he took over the
Yeah.
DME and started organizing that. And yeah, it's not something I feel like I'd be good at. So I'm glad that people like you can put these on. And the other thing you mentioned too, right, is like some of the people you've kind of gotten out of the woodwork to come. The other thing I found too is there are some people who you will only see at live events. Like I remember a couple years
Yeah.
ago when I went to Paper Source, which I don't think is running anymore. There were a couple dudes there, like really old, not online, but have been doing
Yeah.
stuff since like the 70s. Super, super interesting to talk to. But a lot of times you'll find people at events that you don't see online, but you
Yeah.
can go and talk to them sometimes. So that's really valuable for me as well.
Yeah, I don't keep a social media profile anymore or anything like that. So, and I think that's becoming a little bit more commonplace. But especially like you said, some of the old guard, in the space, like they like to come to events because they enjoy the people and getting face to face with people, but you won't find them online. So, and I think that's a great thing to about the live events is the people that you might not meet otherwise, exactly like you said.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, Ben, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it. So we'll put all
Yeah,
those
man, it's a
links in the
pleasure.
descriptions. Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, before we end,
Yeah.
I said this off air, but I wanted to tell people on air that I really appreciate your efforts in the note space. I think you put out great content and are super helpful to people, and I think that's really, really needed in the space. So I'm excited to get to meet you face to face out in Scottsdale, and we'll chop it up.
That sounds great. No, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I like that you're having it at a golf course. So there are opportunities to play because that's my thing. So that's
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
all right. I'll see you there.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you.